In 2023, our U.S. Supreme Court really redefined what a wetland is. And it might seem technical or arbitrary by nature, but by narrowing the definition of what constituted a wetland, it changed what areas have protections and what areas don't. So in North Carolina, that means that over 2.3 million acres of wetlands lost protections and are no longer defined as wetlands. So whenever there's a proposed development in North Carolina, there's a pretty rigorous review process. And if that development is proposing to build within a wetland area, it doesn't mean that it can't happen. We just have to understand what kind of wetland is there, what rules apply, and if any type of mitigation is required to help offset the impact that development might have on the wetland. And so now there's no review process. And so with this, the wetlands can be developed no matter where they are or how sensitive they are. And it also means there's no mitigation to offset that impact. And so when you think about the fact that a single acre of wetlands will hold over 1 million gallons of water, that's 1 million gallons of storm water that is not going to be in that wetland during a storm, and it's going to be in that building or in that housing development or in that community. And so those wetlands are really important at holding those waters back, especially during storm events.
So once lost, most of the time they aren't restored. Recently in the last 30 years, we have restoration and mitigation practices where government and nonprofits and sometimes private entities will go in and try to restore the damage, but once you lose them, it's lost. And we've lost a lot of our wetlands through time in our state. Now our state has a great history of fisheries. We're the largest estuary of any one state in the country. So I hate to see that legacy diminished and hopefully never lose it.
With 2.3 million acres of wetlands that could potentially be developed, in addition to new proposed changes by the EPA that could potentially double that number, meaning over 4 million acres of wetlands in North Carolina that could be opened up to development, we're really worried about coastal water quality.
My biggest concerns would be is the loss of the buffer. Is more things have opportunities to run off more chemicals. Bad water that's stagnant, not oxygenated properly, gets flushed out from the swamps and into the tidal creeks, and then eventually makes its way out, especially during heavy rainfall and any kind of hurricanes or big storms that we have. And even I've noticed a lot over here during the winter, we have a hard nor'easter. It pulls all of the tide out, and then so that'll suck all of that water out of those creeks and wetlands and out into the main waterways. And that in the fishing industry, we call that bad water. You can start to notice it with crabbing. The crabs will start getting really clingy, and then the next day you come back, you have crabs in your pot that are dead, and then because they can't move with the bad water because they're in the pot. And then you'll go back and forth with that, trying to find that hard line of the quote unquote bad water.
There's always been, people think that farmers and fishermen are fighting each other. In the early days, they couldn't. They had to work together because you were going to work on the farm, and when it comes mid-June, you shrimped. You got your crop out, and then you oystered. And so wetlands has been important to farmers? Yeah, because seafood had been important to farmers.
A lot of these wetlands that could be developed aren't necessarily on the coast. They're isolated wetlands. They might be in the western part of the state, in the mountains, or in the Piedmont, but we live in the coast and a downstream environment. And so everything that happens upstream affects us here. And so our local water quality, our local fisheries, our tourism, it's one of the biggest industries in North Carolina. And no one's going to come swim at the beach or go charter a fishing crew or go out when the water isn't clean enough to play in, swim in, or fish from.
Based on the science, about 70% of our fish species depend on wetlands and marshes as habitat at some stage of their life. And so as a direct result of that, they support the vast majority of our recreational and commercial fisheries in our state. And then what you learn if you fish a lot, certain species love that habitat, like red drum, sheep's head, black drum, flounder like oyster beds and marsh substrate. So you learn that certain species prefer that habitat, but almost all the species depend on it as a nursery function.
There are wetlands of so many different types and sizes. Wetlands themselves are characterized by the water level, the presence of hydric soils, and the presence of certain plants. And so here on the coast, we're used to seeing our beautiful salt marsh, but that's only one type of wetland. Carolina bays are another popular example. There's some beautiful Carolina bays throughout our state. We have precosins, we have bogs and inland areas. Really just any area that is, that environment. So the agricultural community has been a really big part of this conversation, as they should be. They are crucial to our communities here in North Carolina. And so when the Supreme Court decision came down, it was really explained as something that would help farmers be able to farm more of their lands. But in fact, that just isn't true. The way permitting is set up right now, most farmers permit through NRCS and not the Army Corps of Engineers, and there are exemptions in place. And so I think if you ask most farmers, this decision doesn't impact them. They're able to operate with or without it. And so really the real risk is coming from development and more building really all over the state, but especially at the coast.
Think about what it costs to do that. Say if you were going to go clear this woods that's behind us and farm it, I'm not talking about the cost that it would be to buy it. It would take $3,000 an acre to clear it, to put the first crop in it. Is that going to happen when farmers are struggling today to even make a living? I don't see wholesale clearing of land, destruction of wetlands like happened in the 80s and 70s. I just think that the economics of it is not there.
This issue is far from over. And so following the Supreme Court decision, the North Carolina legislature passed the 2023 Farm Act that essentially mimicked the federal definition. So each state in the United States has the option to choose that definition or create their own. And so here in North Carolina, we did adopt the federal definition, and then the EMC, the Environmental Management Commission, formalized that. There still is room. Our legislature could choose to define wetlands separately and go back to our state definition.
One thing I'd encourage everybody to do is learn about them and then tell your neighbor, tell your points of contact that when someone wants to mow down the marsh in front of their house, or if they're blessed enough to live close to the water, or burn it off, not to do so, because that's valuable habitat. And if they have a chance to have to bulkhead or protect their property, keep it natural. And we've learned how to engineer what are called living shorelines, so utilize that. And then tell others about that, whether it's your neighbor, whether it's policymakers, whether it's your legislative leaders, if you're connected with politics, inform our leaders that how important these are the cornerstone of our fisheries in the state.
There is also pending changes coming from the EPA. Ourselves and other groups have commented and urging them to keep the original protections in place. And so it'll be interesting to see how this unfolds the next couple of years, but also just really help people understand that this isn't necessarily always an environmental issue. We're very concerned about the fisheries, about farms, about water quality, but this is also very much a public health and safety and a flooding issue. I think this is something that we saw a lot with Hurricane Helene in the western part of the state. Those are exactly the types of areas that will be impacted by this. More areas will flood during storms. More people are going to be at risk. And so how can we prevent that? And the answer to that, quite simply, is by having stronger wetland protections.